Hi, it's Dwight Little, the director of Halloween 4.
And this is Justin Beam with HalloweenMovies.com and the author of Halloween, The Complete Authorized History. And Dwight, it's great to be here with you today chatting about the film.
Well, thanks. It's been almost 25 years, and it's fun to see it.
Right off the bat here, I don't want to miss the chance to talk about this gorgeous opening sequence here. What was your concept with the credit sequence?
We were trying to get to the idea of what Halloween was and how that holiday began, and we started going through all these books and research materials and realized that it was part of an agrarian tradition starting in New England at the end of the harvest season when the crops were all harvested and winter was coming, and it was kind of a macabre festival. So we found these agricultural images like the ones that we're seeing now, and we wanted to kind of go back to the roots of the Halloween tradition and where that kind of, like the scarecrow and the tractor and the farm equipment. And so it was based on some actual research in terms of the origin of the Halloween, I guess holiday is what we call it now.
It's the perfect weather and sunset and everything. It really sets the tone for it. You grew up in the Midwest, right? So you were referencing your own history?
I did, and I had had a lot of Halloween nights and a lot of Midwestern Halloween experiences. So I tried to bring that visual to Haddonfield, Illinois, which was not really a big stretch for me since I came from outside of Ohio, outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And so I did have a lot of mental reference points and images that had stayed with me that I was able to tap into. This is a fascinating old building that we're looking at here, the mental asylum. One of the hardest things we had to figure out was how to get Michael freed and get him out of prison and on the loose. And, of course, when a prisoner is most vulnerable, or when the law is most vulnerable, is when a patient is actually in transport. So this whole opening sequence was a design to plausibly and realistically get Michael Myers free and back on the loose.
How were you brought into the project here? What was the origin of your involvement?
I had made a couple independent movies, one with Joe Don Baker and another that I had shot in India. And particularly the project, the action adventure called Bloodstone, I had shot in India, was brought to Mustafa Akkad's attention. And he had shot all over North Africa with he was a director himself. And he looked at that project and was very interested in it and was sort of appreciated all the production we had gotten. And then I was given the opportunity to go in and pitch my take on Halloween 4 and how we could do it. So I really was just fortunate that my film Bloodstone got on his desk.
But his doctor, of all people, shot him 6 times.
And what were those early meetings like when you were first discussing the idea with Mustafa?
Well, he was in a big hurry because he had decided to do this by himself with his own money and his own distribution. And there was a writer's strike coming up, and he knew that in order to get the picture out in October, he had to start shooting in April. So he didn't really even have a script. He had a treatment. And so a lot of the early conversations were how to sort of generate a shootable and a good quality script quickly. And I was able to bring in my writing partner, Alan McElroy, knowing that he was fast and good and that we could collaborate. So we were really just talking about how to get Halloween 4 to the screen in 7 or 8 months.
And here we're seeing Michael for the first time in the film. It was a big deal that he was returning after the Michael List Part 3. What was the discussion like about his return? Was there a lot of consideration being taken with the character?
Yeah, I think everybody felt that Season of the Witch was sort of a sidestep, and we were going back a little more into the continuity from the second Halloween, and just really bypassed Halloween 3 in terms of a continuity. and wanted to, have the remnants of the burning, because there was a fire and explosion at the end of Halloween 2. And you can see that later on Donald Pleasance's face. There's some burn marks on his face. And also in the close-up of Michael's hand, you see a lot of scarring and burn marks. And those are all references and throwbacks to Halloween 2.
Watch it.
I can safely say that Michael Myers is now in your hands.
Yeah, well, I guess you're happy to see him go.
Michael Pataki's excellent as Dr. Hoffman there, of course, from Grave of the Vampire, Dracula's Dog, The Glove. As Dr. Hoffman is really sets the tone as the guy who wants to see Michael get as far away from him as he possibly can.
Yeah, he has a wonderful haunted look. Michael has a very haunted look. I think he's passed on, but he had a very haunted and kind of lonely look about his face, which seemed appropriate for this mental hospital and a good guy to set Michael off on his journey. You can see that those shots of the ambulance are the same shots as the ambulance arriving at the hospital. So we just flipped the film and used it twice since we didn't have a lot of time. There's that scarred hand again. And now we get into one of the scenes that people do feel like is one of the most terrifying scenes because it was just very unexpected, this famous thumb sequence.
And was that part of the original plan, or is this something you guys threw in there?
That material was actually added in post-production because we were having trouble with Michael's escape and had to come up with a new way to plausibly get him free, without using guns or without using weapons of any kind. And it was suggested, and I can't remember by whom, that he just used his actual hand itself as the impaling weapon. And it became so shocking that I think it set the tone for the rest of the movie that anything really could happen. And then here, of course, we meet the sisters for the first time. And, little Danielle Harris, we found her in New York and had looked in Los Angeles and then finally found her in New York. And she just, turned out to be a real trooper. And, of course, with Ellie Cornell, we had done very extensive screen tests. And Ellie made it through all the screen tests, and then it was down to her and one other actress, and we tested her again. And we felt that she really carried the Haddonfield, Midwestern kind of a natural quality, but she was also a very instinctive and very natural and instinctive actress.
What really stood out to you about Danielle stepping into this demanding role of Jamie?
Well, she was, as a lot of child actors are, she was mature beyond her years, and she was petite. I mean, Danielle was a bit older in chronological years than her character here, because you can see she plays quite young and vulnerable. But I suspect she was, I don't really remember, but more like 8 or 9, and yet she's playing more, closer to 7, somebody much younger. And but she was very mature and very poised and listened and took direction, and she was an essential part of the success of the movie for sure.
What are some of the things that you and Alan discussed in terms of directions to go with the series, considering Michael making a return?
Well, I think we wanted to be incredibly faithful to the tone of Halloween 1 in terms of, even though they shot that in Pasadena and we were outside of Salt Lake City, we wanted to get the atmosphere of a Midwestern Halloween, number one, so that the ambiance was completely believable. And that's a nice reflection shot. We felt that it would be it would be most scary if the sisters and the family and the boyfriend and the events in the town were very grounded and real. So we weren't trying to be tongue-in-cheek. We weren't trying to be jokey. We were just trying to draw you into the lives of this family and then let the horror and let the threat come out of caring for these people. And I think that was a successful choice, because from the minute we see the two sisters and the family that they're in and the boyfriend, we immediately just start to get drawn into their world, and that's what makes it scary when they're put in danger.
This sequence, of course, introduces the audience to the Shape once again, essentially for the first time with his mask on, and this was George Wilbur.
It was, and we did try to use the mirror. We tried to always shoot Michael a little bit off-center, either in silhouette or in reflection, or a hand, or you really see it in pieces rather than just seeing a full shot and reveal the monster too much too soon. And that's why that work with the mirror was so important, and it gave him a kind of mythology that I think we needed early on. So there, like a shot like that, it's a straight, you just see that face for a moment in the lightning shot, and then he goes back into this silhouette, and that just gives you a glimpse of him before he's gone.
Was your concept for Michael playing him more as a sort of, continuing with your theme of being grounded in reality, was he more of a serial killer, a maniac, or something supernatural?
No, I played him quite literally as an escaped mental patient who was stalking what was his niece once removed, and trying to make a family connection. He eventually goes back. Now this street right here, as you can see, is very Midwestern, but this was actually in Salt Lake City. But it very much echoes the Pasadena streets where Carpenter shot Halloween 1. And we added all the leaves and denuded the trees and made sure we had that very October feeling, because that was going to be essential to being authentic. But going back to Michael for a minute, yes, I did not personally play him as a supernatural creature. There's a sequence later when Donald Pleasance discusses the possibility. But for the day-to-day shooting, I really saw him as an escaped mental patient with his eye that he was coming after Jamie.
Stupid question. Tell her I hope she feels better.
Did you see him as coming after her to eliminate her or to connect with her?
I think he wanted to connect with her, but he had no way of knowing how to do that. In other words, he was so trapped in his own psychosis that I don't think it was in his intention to find her to kill her. It was intention to find her. But then, of course, it becomes twisted and goes off the rails because of who he's become.
Babysit my foster sister. Go and have fun by yourself.
And one element that we should discuss is the mask and the design process for the look of the mask. What were you guys going for?
My future relationship.
Well, the first step was we wanted to echo Halloween 1. We were not trying to reinvent the wheel. We just wanted to have it feel quite close to Halloween 1. But then we did make some adjustments because there were issues with George's physical size, George Wilbur, the actor. He was a very, tall, imposing-looking actor stuntman, and he had a large head. And so we did make some adjustments to the width of the shape and kind of accommodated his particular features. But the real intention was not to do something different. The real intention was to do Michael Myers closely to how he'd been done in the first film.
It's Halloween. Don't you want to get dressed up in a really scary costume and get some candy?
Were there any other experiments with different looks for that mask that one ended up on screen?
There were. They were all rejected. There was a lot of people who had ideas about different ways to reinvent that and make it a little bit more supernatural or make it a little bit more human. But I think it didn't take very long for Mustafa to realize that he really wanted Michael Myers. He didn't want a version, or he didn't want another Michael Myers. He wanted really Michael Myers, and I think he was right. Here you could see on Donald Pleasance's face, those are burn scars that he was to have, gotten at the end of Halloween 2, all that business on his face.
prisoner, therefore he is subject to federal
And those
law.
burns kind of change throughout the film. Like right now, he kind of has the button burn, you know?
Yeah, and it does because this particular sequence was shot very early, and none of us were happy with the prosthetics, and we didn't have time to reshoot it, and so the button burn was toned down for the balance of the movie. There are some inconsistencies. In fact, this close-up right here is one of the few that has the button burn. And
Can you talk about getting Donald on board for this and making his return to the series?
Well, that work honestly was done between the producers and Donald. He was interested in doing it. I think he didn't want to fully commit until he'd seen the script. He was committed conceptually. He really enjoyed playing Loomis and wanted to do it, but of course he needed to see the script. And that was another reason there was such a rush to get a script out, was so that Donald could officially commit. Because without Donald, I mean, really, it isn't Halloween. So we got that script to him, and we're extremely relieved that he had read it and really liked it.
This sequence here is so elaborate. The setup with the crashed ambulance and everything, and the perfect bridge in the background. Can you talk about getting this whole thing set up?
Yeah, we did a lot with the smoke here and the leaves and the mist coming through. We wanted, again, to have a continuing autumnal foreboding feeling. And you can see all the branches are bare, and it's got a very a dark, kind of moody atmosphere to it. It was difficult to get a huge crane and lower that ambulance upside down into the river. Of course, hard to get permission to do that. And then it took a little cajoling to get Donald to walk into the water because he had one shot without changing wardrobe over and over to get him in there. So I had a couple cameras going.
Was there ever any kind of coverage of what happened to the people inside the ambulance? Because there's obviously, we're seeing the aftermath here. Was there
No,
ever any
we just
shots
wanted...
inside?
That was all you saw is that one shot of him looking in, and we know it's been a massacre, and you can see the thing is just covered with blood, and it's just been a complete, massacre is the best word to use for it, and that was, I think, more telling than if we had seen a lot of bodies lying around at that point. And, we just wanted to have Loomis be the only one who really understands what's about to happen. And he's so powerful as an actor that he can convince you of what's to come.
Haddonfield. It's a 4-hour drive. You can reach me through the local police. If you don't find him in 4 hours, I'm sure I will.
In your mind, the Halloween franchise, looking at all the different entries, is it more about Michael and his quest, or is it about his dance with Loomis? Or what do you think is the core of all of this?
I think every director brings their own point of view, or maybe something a little different to it. But I honestly think Halloween 4 is about the family. And it's about the two protectors, Loomis and the sheriff, who are trying to circle this family and keep it from the approach of evil. And I think Michael is the outside. He represents danger, threat, darkness, just evil. And the only people that can protect this family, which is vulnerable, is this man right here, Dr. Loomis, who's the wise man. He's sort of the prophet and the wise man. And then the sheriff, who's just the Gary Cooper of the story, who just has to round the townsfolk together and keep this evil out of the town and try and protect the kids. So it is a Western, isn't it, in a way? And so I think it's, to me, it's a bit more about the family and the doctor and the policeman trying to protect them.
Where was this gas station location?
This is about an hour south of Salt Lake City, in a very rural, somewhat desolate area in Utah. And we found it on a location scout and then converted the inside, adding a lot of our own art department. But we just felt it had a great character about it and was going to give us the scare that we wanted right there, for example. And it also conveniently had a diner attached to the garage. And a lot of locations would have an office, but it was very unique and very unusual to find this diner literally attached to a garage. And it gave us all the production we needed to have Michael escape in the truck and yet still have Loomis see the result of the rampage in the diner.
God in heaven.
See, these shots, these broken telephones and the waitress and everything just destroyed. It really tells you everything you need to know about where Michael's been, and of course this is a haunting moment where he sees Michael really for the first time.
Michael?
And an iconic shot.
Yeah, it is. We knew that this was going to be a big moment.
You waited 10 years. I knew this day would come.
It was very Donald that he just picked that moment and so brilliantly just dropped his cane. That wasn't me. That was all Donald. He just naturally let that cane fall, and it was very haunting when he did it. We had to do it 5 more times, but the original decision to do it was so perfect.
So what's your theory on Michael allowing Loomis to live?
Well, I think there's he's toying with him. He sort of isn't Michael without Dr. Loomis. It's like his shadow self, and I think that maybe in some Michael realizes that without Loomis he ceases to exist. I mean, one thing that is interesting about the series is that there are a lot of archetypal characters, and Michael without Loomis, he really disappears into the dust. So I think he keeps him alive with his own selfish motives.
So you guys were actually allowed to destroy that gas station?
Well, in a movie sense. I mean, of course, all the facades are added and the telephone poles are all movie props. And, we were out of there in 12 hours and the place was spick and span. So that's one of the great things about special effects in movies is you just destroy what you bring in and then put everything back, and no one's ever the wiser. So it certainly looked like we destroyed it, but it was no harm done.
Very convincing, especially considering the state that it was in, earlier.
Yeah, I thought this sequence of making Jamie an outsider and making her a haunted personality and somebody who's, cursed by her own family and her own name. I thought this was so interesting, and you could really feel that upset on Daniel's face, and it was these character building sequences here, though they're not really about the story absolutely, but they pull you into the character, and that's invaluable for later.
Jamie, are you okay?
This character of Lindsay here, some people have speculated that it is supposed to be Lindsay Wallace from the original film. Is that correct?
Well, the name this particular actress was what they call local hire. In other words, she was not brought up from Los Angeles. She was hired locally. The name was as I think Alan would tell you that the name was definitely an allusion to that character, but it wasn't meant to be too on the nose. Just kind of a nice aside to the character of Lindsay.
Strong, fragile egos and all of that.
You won't come on too strong.
Well, I don't want to seem desperate or anything.
Face it, Rach, you are desperate.
What kind of rapport did you see develop between Ellie and Danielle? on set?
It was. It started off. They were pals, and by the end of the film, they were inseparable. I mean, I think they really became movie sisters. They were very attentive to each other. They looked after each other. Particularly Ellie, had a very big sister, maternal, protective feeling towards her, and there was almost an instant chemistry between them. And I think that's what you feel in the movie, that those two are just, we're going to be with them all the way to the end. And so I think they were very close, those two actors.
Make your move. Don't rush me, Brady. Timing's got to
And here we meet Kelly Meeker for the first time, Kathleen Kinmont.
Right, who, was supposed to be the seductress, the other girl, the distraction. But she, in her own way, found a kind of an interesting, grounded character, even though she's a little bit of a siren, a little bit of a type. I never felt that she fell into a parody or.
Fuck off, Wade.
She was very kind of real person, even though she was kind of this sexual energy. She was a very real person in her own right. That's a little town also in Utah, but has a real nice Illinois sort of feeling about it.
Did you have to dress that street? I take
Completely,
it with the water
yeah.
and everything.
The water and, of course, Michael's tow truck and all the wet down and the Halloween costumes, that was all dressed.
Jamie needs a Halloween costume.
You do.
And here's this teenage awkwardness between, Ellie and her boyfriend and all that uncomfortableness. And these two played that innocent dating, I thought, in a very interesting way. And that was our way to get Jamie alone by herself. And then, of course, you see the Michael mask right there. And among the others, it just kind of fits in as one of the masks of Halloween.
When you and Alan were working on the script, were you thinking of Haddonfield as sort of bearing the lore of Michael? Were people aware of him there and he was sort of ingrained in their culture? Or
Yes,
was it
and
something where this was a surprise to the town?
Well, I don't think they ever thought they'd see him again, but he was certainly part of the lore, and I feel like that's in a way why Jamie was ostracized by her friends, and she was a little bit picked on because they knew that Jamie was related in some indirect way to Michael Myers. But what the town never, ever would have expected is that he would, break out of a maximum security mental institution and come back again 10 years later. I think that was what was so shocking, that 10 years later he would be back.
Can I come over after Jamie goes to sleep?
Of course, Brady is played by Sasha Jensen, who would go on to a very memorable role in Dazed and Confused, but really stands out in this film.
He's a strong actor. He has a great look, and he was. We were lucky to have him. He was. Again, he wasn't playing a caricature of the jockey boyfriend. He played him as a real person. That's what I appreciated about all these actors. They could have played their characters as types, and of course they didn't. Again, having Michael in reflection, having him, in bits and pieces, and not quite ever getting too good a look at him, and yet knowing his presence is right there, that he just almost had her this close to the really about the first act of the movie.
She'll be okay?
She'll be fine.
Again,
Did you
in the
consider
mirrors.
Did you consider Jamie having a connection with him?
Well, I didn't want to set that up. Of course, later at the very end of the movie, you feel that touch, that psychic and whatever that supernatural touch is from between generations. But no, at this point in the story, we weren't trying to play that up.
This sequence is great. In fact, it's kind of the first time in the series, and maybe the only time, that you really see Loomis as kind of vulnerable, and it really grounds him in a way as a human being, dealing with these kids coming by, and of course, enter Reverend Jackson Sayer.
Well, the Reverend was just a great bit of writing on Alan's part, because he gave us a strange biblical mythology, and he talks about, chasing the devil and going after the demon, and he's on this quest, and Loomis, of course, is listening to him like he's crazy, but the truth is Loomis is on the exact same quest that this Reverend is on, and Alan very cleverly created, in a sense, Loomis's alter ego through this Reverend.
Loomis. Haddonfield.
Car trouble?
Sort of.
You're hunting it, ain't you? Yeah, you're hunting it all right. Just like me.
What are you hunting, Mr. Sayer?
Apocalypse, end of the world.
Yeah, it's almost like Loomis having a conversation with himself, kind of, what am I doing?
That's exactly right. He is having a conversation with himself, and he's hunting the exact same monster that this Reverend is, and to hear him talk about it in these strange, almost apocalyptic strains is interesting to Loomis.
I know that, Mr.
And not that far a departure from him in the way that he talked about Michael in the first two films.
Right, and later it does in this film as well. He talks about him as being evil on two legs, and
right.
So when we get to the sheriff's station later in the movie, that's when Loomis really has to tell the sheriff that Michael Myers is not of this world.
I love that you gave him a chance to smile in a Halloween film.
Good point.
And here, more scene setting, perfect Midwestern, kids in the park.
Yeah, the toilet papering of the trees and getting the whole atmosphere set for the evening those were good touches, I think.
Here I am.
One of the things that is interesting in this kind of suspense film is you often have to find ways to get rid of all the powers of authority. You have to get rid of the parents. You have to get rid of the adults. You have to separate the vulnerable from the evil. So here, of course, we had to make sure that the parents were going out that night, that they were going to a party or a dinner or something, and that would leave the two girls alone in the house. And later we have to do the same thing with the townspeople and show how everybody gets separated and ends up leaving our two heroes vulnerable. Now, this is one of the few straight POVs in the film, but this is an actual now lurking POV, which we don't do a lot, but we do once in a while.
He's not back from work yet? Okay. Well, when he comes in, could you tell him to drop by at about 8? I should be home by then. This is Rachel. Okay. Bye.
Where you were shooting in Salt Lake City, was it all in a relatively close area, or were you pretty spread out with these houses?
There were chunks of work that were together, the work around this house, but it was quite spread out because we had to be in the Salt Lake, in the Utah State Prison for some of those opening sequences. Then we were out by the diner, so we were within about, I would say, a 50-mile radius. We were on the move a good deal in terms of moving the company.
Now, this box of photos that Michael's come across here, is this intended to be something that maybe Jamie had that was handed down from Laurie? Or was it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, what we wanted to do is to get Laurie Strode physically into the movie, and we wanted to make the very strong connection between Jamie's sort of memorabilia box and Jamie's comfort box, and make sure that we saw that, Jamie Lee Curtis was there. We wanted to make that connection with her photograph. And of course, we had Jamie Lee Curtis's permission to do all that. And I think in that very simple scene, it tells you exactly that there's a connection between those two characters that's very familial.
Enter Bo Starr as Sheriff Meeker.
He was a professional football player, but also a very fine actor. And I thought he took the Gary Cooper part and did a really good job.
10 years ago, he tried to kill Laurie Strode. Now he wants her daughter.
Yeah, there's some discussion among fans where it's the Sheriff Brackett camp versus the Sheriff Meeker camp.
Okay.
From 1 and 2, and then 4 and 5.
Right. Well,
two different kinds of authority.
Yeah.
Between here and Richmond, a filling station in flames. I tell you, Michael Myers is here in this town. He's here to kill that little girl and anybody who gets in
This, I thought, was an essential monologue in the film near the midway point, because this is where, Loomis tells the audience exactly what the stakes are, what's happened, and the sheriff is willing to dismiss him as a crank and a nut, but he's so convincing and so passionate that even the sheriff realizes that he better get on board and take this seriously.
And I love how when he walks in, they kind of know who he is. They had been forewarned that one day he might show up again.
And by God, there he is. Yeah, but now the sheriff is like, he's not going to just dismiss this crank completely, and off they go to, see what's happened with the phone lines, and see what's really going on here in the town. This is a great house, just classic looking house.
Yeah, very Midwestern.
Hi, what a curious little clown. See what I have for you. There you are, sweetheart. Thank you. You're welcome, honey. Had enough?
No way.
So the costume that Jamie's wearing here obviously is a throwback to what Michael was found in at the beginning of the original. Was that a conscious decision to tie them together, or was that her decision to try to sort of ape what she had seen in the picture?
No, I think, we were just, as filmmakers, just trying to keep reinforcing those kind of psychic images from Halloween 1, and it becomes an essential part, of course, at the end of the movie, where that is passed along, and she picks that costume out in the dime store. So it was really Alan's effort to pull all those threads together.
That T-shirt right there is one of the most iconic in all of horror cinema. Did you guys write that in, or is that something
that was designed and written, and she wore it well.
The film is very blue, which is sort of an element that is carried through from the original in a way as well. What was your working relationship like with Peter Collister, your cinematographer?
Well, Peter and I actually came up together, and we know each other all the way back to Cleveland, and then we both ended up at USC together. We worked together on our student films at USC, and when we got out of film school, we did our first feature together. So Peter and I had been working together as a team by the time of this movie for a long time. And one of the things that Peter does is he uses the blue light, especially at night. And I think he had studied Halloween 1 very carefully. But Peter's gone on to have a very creative and interesting career as a DP. He's still very active and very busy shooting movies. So he's done very well, and we've worked together on and off over the years. But by the time we got to Halloween 4, it was something we were both anxious to do together.
Police station. You're closing down without a good goddamn reason. Well?
Now, most of these actors were from Salt Lake City, so they I thought they brought a nice sort of authenticity to the look of the townspeople.
Well, come on.
And Earl, played by Gene Ross, had been in Legend of Boggy Creek and Friday the 13th, the final chapter, so he's kind of a known face by this point.
Yeah, and just he's absolutely funny without being. You laugh with him, but not at him. He was a very, very entertaining actor.
And it makes sense that the locals would band together to prevent what they had seen happen before. Just like the sheriff, they're not taking any chances.
Right, and they're not going to let that happen again. They're not going to be embarrassed or humiliated. This time they're going to hunt. If there is a Michael Myers out there, they're going to hunt him down like a bear or a deer and put him over the truck and bring it in. They're not fooling around. And then, of course, here, Dr. Loomis realizes exactly how close Michael is.
Something?
He's been here.
How do you know? This is starting to spook me, Doc.
At least I'm not alone.
It's interesting how Michael and Loomis are kept apart through most of these films. And it's Michael's quest for one thing, Loomis's quest for another, and it all comes together to a head at some point.
Yeah, you've got, and what is interesting is we had that opportunity to have Loomis and Michael see each other eye to eye in that diner, and I thought that was really essential to have them have a moment where they lock eyes, and without that, the quest isn't quite as interesting. But when you see, the hunter and the prey staring at each other across the counter, it really helps going down the road.
Telephone to the police right now.
This Bucky has become something of a cult figure himself. There was even a website at one point completely dedicated to Bucky. It was called Bucky's Power Station. And, fans are fond of wearing they wear the construction helmets to conventions and things that say Bucky.
Poor Bucky. Yeah, it was a tough night for Bucky.
People have asked, why does Michael bother with him?
Well, he's shutting down the power. This whole thing is about shutting the city down. There go the lights right now. Yeah. And of course, as writers, we in order to make the rest of the night plausible, we had to destroy the phone lines. So after the diner blows up, you see the fire go up the telephone poles and destroy the phone lines. And now, of course, he's thrown the whole town into darkness, and that gives him an edge. So Bucky was a very unfortunate circuit breaker. These scenes now, of course, everything is cast into darkness or into moonlight, and that allows us to, increase the sense of dread. And now the worst has happened, which is Jamie's been separated, and that's a pretty scary thought.
Jamie!
One thing I did want to ask you about is that it's been said that there was another script originally written by Dennis Etchison, who ended up doing the novelizations for several of the films. That was more of a ghost story. Do you remember anything about that script?
No, I don't have any recollection. There was a script, a kind of a loose script when I was brought in, and those writers' names are mentioned in the story credit at the beginning of the film. But in the end, we kind of went a different way. So the ghost version, I'm not aware of.
Jamie? Jamie? Jamie?
This sequence here with the fence and the rundown car, it seems like it's a completely different location than where the rest of these houses lie. Was this some other area where you shot this?
No, although we had to create some of this in order to have a fence that she could jump over and this kind of stuff. For example, all has to be stunt safe, and these are movie fences and so that she doesn't get cut or hurt. So maybe you're feeling a little bit of the fact that some of that we had to add to the environment. So maybe you have a pretty good sense of that. But no, this most of this tied together because we didn't have the opportunity to relight a lot of different areas. But
I see. Okay.
But you might be sensing that we brought in some of the dressing, like the car and the fence. We brought that in.
Whoever you are, I have a big dog with me and he bites.
It's interesting that the few POV shots in the film are sort of alternating between Jamie and Michael.
Yeah, it's true. There was a lot of conversation about the Michael POV shots, and I think we all felt that we needed them, but we should not overdo it. We should just be very, very careful about when to do it, and we did try and limit it. Now you'll notice that all the cars, the front headlights have that yellowish tint.
Yeah.
So we went through and we put gels on the front of all the cars because we wanted even the cars to look like Halloween night. So instead of seeing, a white headlight on the front of the cars, if you look closely when Loomis drives up and when you see cars, they've all been the lights have all been gelled to give it that orange kind of color.
And here, multiple Michaels. What a horror of an idea to think that there's more.
Well, and it was good because it played into a Halloween prank that the kids in the town would have been aware that there was a Michael mythology and that they were going to be messing with the sheriff and trying to, cause trouble. But at the same time, it's a terrifying idea as well. And then, of course, right at the moment that you think it's just a prank, then you look out the back window and there he is, right standing there in the middle of the street.
The most visible of all of them. Everyone else is kind of hiding, and there he is.
Right in the middle of the street.
There.
Now, this is where Dr. Loomis does start to talk about Michael being more than just a normal psychopath, that he's touched in some other supernatural way.
And it's another example of a scene where you're handing us the aftermath of something that you don't. I mean, was it a conscious effort throughout the entire film? Less is more. Leave it in the minds of the audience.
Let the audience fill in all this mayhem. I mean, this is pretty disturbing. This severed limb, but what you can imagine went on in that police station, I think, or imagine what went on in the van. This increases, I think, the fear rather than actually seeing it.
What the Sam Hill is going on?
One home, Earl. It's police business.
This is kind of the scene where Loomis says, I'm a little wiser than you in this situation. This is all you have to work with.
Also, the sheriff loses control of his town a bit here, and this vigilante posse goes out on their own, and he's lost control.
Like the last time? How many people killed back then? How many kids?
Al here lost his boy 10 years back.
Well, not this time, Ben. I'll handle this my own way.
Did you ever talk about who his son was from the originals?
Not so much. Not so much.
You haven't got a police force. These men may be the only defense you've got.
Let's hunt this bastard.
God help us.
This was a very interesting idea that Michael needed to get to the house, and he had actually just hidden himself in the back of the police vehicle, which gave me the creeps, honestly. I thought this was a very very terrifying idea that he was just lying down in the back of the police car. So when the police car arrives, he's bringing Michael Myers right to the house. I thought this was a very clever bit of business.
And in the previous scene with Rachel and Jamie, they're in the back seat actually, and that's their sort of sanctity. That's their security.
Right, and now there's Michael right there.
Yep.
And of course, the parents are late by moments.
And where are they for the rest of the film? Who knows?
I can't remember if we ever make an illusion. I guess they don't show up till the very end, do they?
Right. For a very pivotal scene.
Right.
There he is!
If I could talk for just a moment about the score in this picture, you brought in Alan Howarth, who was an associate of Carpenter, having worked with him on a number of films, the original Halloweens.
Well, he was.
What were you looking for in him?
He was an essential ingredient, and what we wanted to do was to use that very thematic and very haunting Halloween theme, but at the essential moments, because we didn't want to overuse it, and we wanted to keep reinventing it. So you'll hear a chord or two of it, or you'll hear it done in a slightly different way. But we really pulled back, and we had other kinds of very interesting cues, other kinds of music that Alan wrote for the film, suspense cues and action cues and emotional cues. But when we would introduce the theme, we wanted to be very careful about not overusing it.
I think it was Kathleen who suggested at a convention once that you had asked these two to rehearse this scene beforehand. Is that true?
Well, sure, because what I didn't want to do is have a lot of uncomfortableness. One of the things that a director is struggling with all the time is time. And if there's a lot of conversation and a lot of uncomfortableness and then lighting, it's hard to get a lot of shots. So I was hoping that they could get through all the giggles and all the laughter and all the awkwardness, so that by the time they came to the set, they were ready to just move forward. And I think it helped, because I think it just let them be less self-conscious on the day. I mean, it's difficult to do in front of a crew and in front of people and in the middle of the night. It's awkward.
Your dad.
And was there originally nudity in that sequence?
There was. And I don't know which, because the film did come out with a restricted rating, and I think it might have been, in the end, it might have been Mustafa's choice to just, again, keep it just hidden from the audience and kind of leave people wanting more. Less is more. I don't think it was a choice by the ratings board. I think it was a choice of the producers.
Kelly, I want you to close and lock all the downstairs windows.
Why?
Just do it.
Where's the radio?
Right through the kitchen, you'll see the basement stairs.
And here we're setting up sort of a Night of the Living Dead scenario where you're boarding yourselves from the beast that just actually got delivered to the house.
Right. So this is very well crafted screenplay writing, because we're putting all the chess pieces at play and sending Brady up to secure the attic and get him busy upstairs with his toolbox, and getting Ellie and Jamie up there, and knowing that the full time that Michael has been brought right to the house. So it's good Hitchcockian suspense here. And of course the reveal that the sheriff is quite aware that Brady's all over his daughter, which I always got to laugh.
Yeah.
And now we know that Michael's literally just stepped out of the vehicle.
So did you shoot this inside a house entirely, or was there some soundstage work with all the interiors here?
These shots in the house were all practical. The thing that was built as we get there was the roof itself, and once they escape up onto the roof, that was all built so that we could have safety and access and harnesses and proper stunt work. But these sequences here, the stairway, the basement, the living room, this was all a practical location there in Salt Lake City.
In a lot of these old houses, the rooms are really small and kind of awkward, but you have a lot of movement within your frame throughout a lot of these sequences as you're coming in on these two, for example. Was it tough to work in one of these older homes that way?
It is. It's very cramped, but we didn't use a lot of steady cam and virtually no handheld, because I didn't want it to be distracting. I didn't want you to even really be aware of the camera. And I think right here you'll see that, the camera is moving, it's on a track, and it's telling the story, but you're not aware that the movie's being photographed. I know that sounds funny, but it's like if you stop even thinking about those issues, then you're just experiencing what you're seeing. And that's always sort of my ambition is to have the camera be a silent partner. It should be elegant and be where it needs to be, but I don't want you thinking about the camera when you're watching the movie, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Logan, I want you right here by the front door, okay? This is the deadbolt key. It's secure. And now padlock the back door. This is the only way in and out of this house. You got that?
You got it, then.
And why don't you come make us some calls?
Speaking of trims, do you remember there being anything that had to be cut from the film? Were there any extra scenes that were requested to be cut?
I believe that there were, and now this is 25 years ago, so I'm not sure that I can remember what they were. There was not a lot, but I think there were some scenes at the little department store in town. There were some small, maybe family or character scenes or scenes in the hospital that were trimmed up. Not a lot. I mean, we used almost everything we shot, but there may have been a few small dialogue scenes that were lifted in the final cut.
Real soon, Jamie.
People have talked about there being longer cuts overseas. Have you ever seen a different cut than this of the film?
Never have, ever. I mean, and I've seen every time it gets released on a different format, I get a chance to look at it again, and it's always been exactly the cut we delivered. So I wouldn't be able to comment on that because I've never seen it.
This sets up a great gag with Michael later with that chair.
Well, it does, and now we're just getting all the players sort of staged. We're getting the sheriff by the front door, and getting everybody in position so that this final sequence in the house can really pay itself off. And I think this was, again, giving Alan a lot of credit to a very, very well constructed screenplay.
Why was Jamie left alone up there?
She was. we needed just logistically to get her down the stairs, and sometimes you just have to own it. I think you're right, though. Honestly, it's like, why would they do that? But she's checking with the sheriff. She's going to make sure everything's okay, and that's how we excused it.
Stay, please.
Sure.
How long after that?
Of course, this is the first time we do reveal that he's in fact in the house, and we were able to do it in one shot. So, and It didn't take much, but on a big screen in the theater, the audience was very aware that he was now in the house.
Thank Christ. Yeah, this is Ben Meeker, sheriff over in Haddonfield. Our phone and power lines are down, and we have a killer running loose in the street.
So one of the things that happened around this time in genre cinema was an escalation of the graphic. Did you feel any pressure as you were making the film, or as you and Alan were coming up with the script, to sort of keep up with the times and make this more of a splatter type picture? Was that ever an option for you?
Well, no, we had certain sequences that we knew were going to have a shock value, but this movie never really had the full, Friday the 13th kind of gore fest. I mean, without doubt, there's some gory sequences in the film, but I don't think we felt pressure to. I think we wanted to keep it authentic to what Halloween was, and especially to what Halloween 1 was. But I don't remember any general feeling that we had to, up the ante in any particular way. Of course, there goes one of the protectors out the front door, so we're reducing the number of people in the house. Now Loomis is gone.
Are you looking for this?
I didn't know you and Brady had anything, okay? You knew.
You just didn't care.
He's not married.
How were the people in Salt Lake dealing with you guys being there and shooting the picture?
Well, I was able to hire a first AD from Salt Lake City named Dennis Stewart, who's gone on to produce and do his own work and very big studio features. And he was very dialed into the local film community, and he was from Salt Lake, so he knew the local community as well. And I think because of some of the key people we had on the crew, we were very well treated, and on the whole quite well accepted, because we had joined forces with locals that were experienced and respected in the film community up there.
When that word comes, you go tell Deputy Logan.
Okay.
Now, you understand?
Uh-huh.
Did the production head there because of tax incentives? Are you aware?
Yes, it was what's called a right to work state, which means that there are less restrictions in terms of union demands, and there were certain, I believe, tax incentives, but the need or the desire to shoot in Salt Lake was definitely a financial issue. There was not a lot of money. This was all independent money. It was not a studio budget. And for that reason, I think they were trying to get as much production value as they possibly could with the money they had.
How long was the shoot?
It was, my memories, it was 36 days. And so that would have been six-day weeks. And I do believe we shot on Saturdays as well. You don't really see that done very much anymore. Everything is pretty much a 5-day week, but at that time it was not unusual to shoot a 6-day week. So I believe that's what it was. It was six-day weeks. And so you have to work very quickly and try and get as much production as you can. But Peter did an amazing job with lighting these night sequences, doing it quickly and doing it well, because a less experienced DP, I think, might have, been intimidated by trying to get all this done so fast.
Wish they'd fix the power. At least we'd have some.
Yeah, the lighting is very natural throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, he's not trying to overdo it, and yet there's a lot of demands on the cinematographer, because it's either low light or no light, candlelight, moonlight, and all those things are very difficult.
When you talked to George Wilbur about Michael Myers and his portrayal of Michael, what did you ask of him in that role?
Well, I just wanted him to be thinking. That was the main note that I kept saying. I said, George, I know you're behind a mask, and I know that we don't really see a lot of the expressions of your face, but I want you to play it as if this character is really thinking, because I wanted what we do see of the eyes and what we do see of the body language to be, in a sense, human, but also not just a robot, that there's some kind of life, there's a consciousness behind it. And I wanted to make sure that we tried to take the robot out of Michael. And so my notes to George were always, I directed him as if he were an actor without a mask. If you're the star of a horror movie, sooner or later you're going to have a good scream. I thought that was a good one.
Yeah. And Jamie too.
Yeah.
They both Rachel and Jamie have to go through some vocal calisthenics.
That's right. You got to have some good screams.
What's going on?
I've got to find Jamie.
No, we got to do this. Get out of here right now.
Not without Jamie.
So what happened to him there?
Yeah, well, that's an allusion to Deliverance. I don't know if anybody picked up on it, but that's an allusion to when Ronnie Cox comes out of the river and his arm is twisted back behind his head. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But it's the way that the sheriff landed with his arm twisted up behind his head. It's as if Michael had dislocated his shoulder in such a way that it was sitting in an unnatural position. And it was done as a slight homage to Deliverance.
Brady!
No.
The ineffective hero.
Yes, it's without that gun, what can he do? He's the last line of defense, and that gun is not going to help. Of course, when we saw that plate glass window behind the staircase, that's when we decided on this location, because we knew at the end we were going to be backing into this shot, that shot right there. And that's really one of the things that sold us on the location, was the way the stair wrapped around in front of that window like that.
So Sasha's demise here is done without any special effects aside from sound. Is that right?
That's right. We just snapped his neck, and it's a physical thing. There's no tricks to it, no special effect. It's just that. So it doesn't take much to do it if you have the right angle. No, there's no prosthetics, or there's no special work there. And of course, he was standing on an apple box and just supporting his own weight, so he was never particularly uncomfortable. Now, this attic sequence does lead us out onto the roof, and the roof itself, as we discussed, was built out in the middle of a field.
How high off the ground was it?
The gutters were only about a foot off the ground, so you could step right up onto it. The chimney, the height of the roof, that probably would have been maybe 15 feet high. But we built it as low to the ground as we could, because we wanted to be we wanted to be as safe as possible because of Danielle and the situation. Those point of views were, of course, shot separately.
That had to have been tough to shoot with these, even though you were low to the ground, with these angles on the roof, the girls climbing, and
It was very
Slippery
difficult.
shingles.
It was slippery. It was very hard to track up there. It was at night because this is not an inside soundstage. We were outside. And it was limited hours, of course, on Danielle. And this was some very difficult work. And Ellie Cornell really had to go for it because she had the weight of, Jamie and up and down, take after take after take, and she was really strong about it.
So we're not seeing stunt personnel there. We're actually seeing them.
Yeah, this is all them. Now, of course, this is George, who can do his own stunts, but all this work on the roof, this is all of our heroes. Now, there's one shot, of course, when Jamie lands on the rope and is hanging from the gutter. That's a stunt person. There's 2 stunt shots coming up, but all this work, or a good deal of it, is done by the actors themselves. That crash into the chimney, that of course would have been a stunt lady, but everything else was them. See, this kind of work here, that would be a stunt person.
Sure.
And this.
So one of the mysteries with Michael's character is that he can appear anywhere at any time. That being the case, many people have asked, how did he get down so fast?
How did he get down from the roof? Well, just think, all this time right here, he could be going down. There he is right
Running.
there.
He was just sprinting, just running through the house.
Yeah, either that or he didn't bother. He could have jumped onto a half roof and just jumped down. I think Michael has capabilities. This was definitely one of the biggest scares in the movie, is when Jamie runs into Donald Pleasance, because of course it's all set up that we think she's run right into him, and this really was a jolt to the audience when she runs into Donald Pleasance.
And now they're separated again.
Right. And she's completely isolated and alone with just Michael after her, so.
What are you doing out here alone?
Everybody's dead. I just want to go home.
No, you can't. I've just been there. That's the first place he looked for you.
Yeah, Michael has similar jump scares, as Loomis. When Loomis pops into frame like that, it's another connecting thread between the two of them.
Right, that's right. And this time, the audience was sure that was going to be Michael, and we get Loomis one more chance. The protector comes back one more time.
Where was the school location?
This is the same school where all the kids wear the clown masks earlier in the movie. Mm-hmm. And it was a public school there, not in Salt Lake City. And we were able to do the day work in the morning and then take lunch and then come back and do this night work in the same school. So this hallway would have been the hallway where the kids were taunting Jamie.
Sure. All right, there's your blonde-haired mask, and this is your chance to tell the story if there is one.
This is strictly, and I'm afraid it's a horror to say it, but this was a production mistake. That the real mask.
Is there a story behind that mask, Dwight?
Only that we had to grab something off the prop truck quickly because the real mask had been temporarily lost, and we didn't have time to not keep shooting.
So you weren't aware of the blonde-haired mask making its way onto set and into shot. It
Well,
was just
only
something
in
that kind of got looked over.
We should have reshot it. We weren't able to get back to this location again. I hate to make it sound as mundane as a production problem, but we should have reshot it. It's just that they had to grab one of those from the department store off the prop truck, and something had happened to the proper mask. So I wish I could say there was a thematic or other reason for it, but it was just a mistake, I'm afraid.
There's been so much speculation about that, so it's good that you're kind of laying that to rest.
Yeah, that conspiracy theory is being debunked.
In the school!
Maybe now would be a good chance to discuss working with Mustafa on the film. Obviously, he's a director himself, and so what's he like to interact with when you're working on a production?
Well, he was a director, and interestingly, had gone to USC Film School, so we had similar references, and I was able to have a very collaborative relationship with him. He honestly left me alone if he had a particular question about Michael in particular, or something in dailies that he had a question about, we would always discuss it. But in no way was he intrusive or had a list of demands. He didn't second guess me in any way. He let me make the movie. If there were any concerns at all, he would raise it in a very respectful way. So it was just a wonderful. He was supportive. He wanted me to make the movie I wanted to make, and he wanted to make sure I had all the tools that I needed within the limits of the budget. He wanted to make sure we had everything we needed to get it done. So he was quite supportive.
He's famously protective of Michael, and that character especially coming back with part 4, sort of sitting squarely on Michael's and yours shoulders.
Right.
There weren't any do's and don'ts or anything like that from him with the character.
Only about
like you can't kill him or anything.
He was very concerned about the overalls being right, and the mask and the hair but he paid attention to the dailies. He looked at the dailies very carefully. But I think to be honest with you, I think he liked what he saw, because we never treated Michael just like in broad daylight. We always had him in mirrors or in silhouettes or in reflections or in slow motion. We kept him, mysterious, and I think that helped the mythology that he was trying to create. So on the whole, I think he liked what he saw in the dailies. But you're right. He was famously protective of that character.
Was there consideration for a part 5 throughout the production? Were there some elements that he wanted to make sure were left open? I mean, obviously we'll discuss the end when we get there. But.
Right. No, honestly, the Allen's script was written as a standalone Halloween 4, and I think Halloween 5 had to be retrofitted a little bit into what was left. So no, Halloween 4 was meant to be a complete film of its own.
This whole sequence with the trucks involves stunt after stunt with these guys flying off. Tough to shoot?
It was very difficult, and one of the reasons is this, even though it doesn't look it, it was extremely cold. We were quite high. We were at maybe 3,000 feet to get a road that we could work with nobody around. And so it was very cold, and we were shooting till dawn, so these were very difficult sequences to get. And yes, it was it was very challenging. All this was stunt work, of course.
That throat tear on Earl when he's driving the truck. Was that originally part of it, or was that also added afterwards, like the thumb to the forehead?
That was just like the thumb. That was an added shot of the throat tear, and it was done to sort of increase the shock value right before the final showdown with Michael. That was an additional shot.
Were you aware of those things, or were you actually directing those?
No, I directed both of them. I directed the thumb, and I directed all that day of inserts. I was there with Peter. It was the same DP, the same props. It was all of us together.
Now, how is this done with Michael being hit by the truck?
You can see those shoulder pads, how padded up he is. It's what they call a cable ratchet. So you see the impact from one side, and then he's pulled on a ratchet. It's editorial, but he also was being physically pulled on a ramp, and it yanks the stuntman up in the air. Once they're padded up and land properly, it's quite safe to do.
Was the well that Michael is in front of written into your script?
It is. It was written, and we built it because we had to have a way for sort of Michael to go back to hell, to disappear and be gone after the shooting. So we had built an old well and had all the boards. And here, of course, is the transfer of energy. This is when Jamie picks up the energy, and we head towards the surprise ending.
Get down!
In a film that's played so realistic up until this point, the sort of transfer of energy concept, it seems like it's from a different approach. Sort of. Was that always your intent, was for him to hand that off to her that way, or was there ever a different way that you thought about doing that, or having her end up where she does?
Well, I didn't want to make a movie that crossed over in terms of, impulse or electrical energy. I still, in my mind, the movie ends here with, sort of, it's the end of any serial killer movie where he's vanquished at the end. The slightly supernatural overtones are picked up more in these scenes when Jamie takes the mask. So I never wanted. I was very afraid of doing anything that would be hokey or would take away from the, what had been working throughout the movie. I didn't want to pull something out of the horror sci-fi hat that would make us look differently at what we'd seen.
I'm going to take Jamie upstairs.
And so in your mind at this point in the film, Michael Myers is dead?
He's dead. Absolutely. It's over.
Of course, we're looking back to the original film now.
Right.
With that point of view, the hand in the drawer.
Yeah, this is very much an homage and a rethink of the original film.
I doubt anyone is watching this without having watched the film first. So just considering that, can you talk about you and Alan and your discussions about Jamie making this transition here at the end?
Well, even when the mask goes on, we don't quite know who it is. So this reveal of Jamie at the top of the stairs was going to be horrific, or we hoped it would be horrific. And somehow, Danielle got herself, with my help, into a state where she really went to a terrifying place. And I think the camera and the performance just takes it from there.
Was that always a part of her, do you think, or was that simply transferred from Michael in that moment?
To me, it was the transfer at that moment. I don't think that was part of her until the hand touch. But, that's just me. I think there's other ways to look at it. But I directed it feeling like she was just Jamie until she was, in fact, touched by Michael, and that whatever that energy was transferred. That was my feeling about it.
It's interesting with Mustafa being so protective of Michael that he would approve of an ending like that. I mean, it obviously works on a shock level. I'll never forget seeing it, discussing it with my friends endlessly on the bus. What was going to happen next. But was there any concern about the direction, being that at this point everyone is aware Halloween is now a series?
No, I don't think people were concerned. I think the first time we saw that with an audience, I think it was pretty clear that it was so effective. And it continued the series. It passed along the torch, not in a good way, I guess, but it passed along the torch, and it was a shock. And I think once we saw it with an audience, I don't think after that there was really any discussion of undoing it.
Were you approached to direct Part 5?
I was, and many after. Mustafa called me every year, and he always called me. He was very nice about it and always asked if I would do another one. And my feeling is that with the combination of Peter Collister and the cast and Alan McElroy, I felt that we had gotten it right, and I was almost afraid of trying it again, because it's very hard to bring all the elements together to work as one complete movie. And I was a little superstitious about it because I felt like we had done it, and I thought maybe another director should try their hand at it, because I felt like I'd done the best I could.
At this point, so far removed in the age of remakes, revisiting, all these other things, would you ever approach Halloween again?
I think I would now, because I think it interests me on another level now, and I think it would be interesting to go back and to sort of look at the origin story. But there was a series of Miramax versions done within the Malcolm McDowell versions that have been done fairly recently, and I think that those movies were so completely different that it's, I don't know. I would want to take it back in a completely new direction, but it's Miramax obviously decided to do something else.
This has been a real pleasure. Thanks again, Dwight, for being a part of this.
Thanks for having me, Justin.